Wrong way to make in India. This is important article written by Arvind Panagadia in Times of India on 13th December. Here, can the import substitution be integrated into Make in India? Critically examine. Now government is trying to make the concept of import substitution into Make in India, whether it is realistic or not, and because of the policy of import substitution, how the country is affected after independence, we have to learn about that. So it will throw some light on the economics of India after independence also. What is import substitution? Here, let us say, these shirts are being imported from America. These shirts are being imported from America. Then they will not be allowed, and Indian manufacturers are to make these shirts. So domestic production will be increased to substitute for the import of goods. That is import substitution. After independence, we followed this import substitution, and as per some economists, experts, it badly affected India. And here, domestic production will be increased. So we have to increase our production by, in fact, imposing restrictions on imports. That means they will be done through import controls, tariffs and other restrictions. Of course, nowadays tariffs and other restrictions are not that easy. They are based on WTO regulations, and in those days some tariffs were imposed. And another important aspect is this protection to domestic industries may be required in the initial stages of economic growth, but not always. Here it is with a view to increase self-sufficiency. So please understand what is the meaning of import substitution. Trade policy after independence, if you see, India has gone for import substitution. That means restrict the imports and promote our own manufacturing, or you can say domestically those goods are to be manufactured. So that is in fact import substitution. The policy aimed at replacing or substituting the imports with domestic production. So what happened? World class materials will not come to our country because we followed import substitution after independence. What happened? There were several controls on imports, and in 1960s, because of the import controls, several movies could not be made into color. So in those days, that color film was to be imported, and the movies which have got worldwide market, they made the movies which have got worldwide market like Hindi and Tamil in 1960s, and by earning some money, then they imported the film, color film. So there were several import controls in 1960s, and the policy protected domestic industries from foreign competition through tariffs and quotas. Because of import substitution, imports were restricted, minimized, and government protected the domestic industries. And the policy of protection was based on the notion in those days industries of developing countries are not in a position to compete with the advanced countries. So therefore some protection was required in those days, but ultimately it resulted in the spoiling of the Indian economy also, as per some experts. Though the protection is required in initial 10 years, 20 years, but it extended up to 1990s, and it resulted in the spoiling of the India in terms of making world-class products. When the imports are restricted, then what happens? We do not know about world-class products, and we are contented with our own products which are not that superior, or you can say which are inferior to the global products. Then no serious thought was given to promote exports until mid-1980s. Initially, we relied on import substitution. If one looks at India, imports as a proportion of GDP, imports as a proportion of GDP were dropped to just 4% in 1969-70 from the peak of 10% in 1957 and 58. So they dropped in 10 years from 10% of GDP to 4% of GDP because of the excessive controls on imports. So excessive controls on imports permit license Raj, corruption. Of course, all these things were in fact spoiled the Indian economy during 1950s right up to 1990s, and global competitive edge has gone out of dictionary of India because of these policies till 1990s. Right? Then what are the steps taken by India in 1960s? In 1960s, what India has done? India banned consumer goods imports. The pressure was on the domestic producers to supply high quality products has gone, because when there is no foreign mobile phone of high class quality in our country, then our domestic producers may produce very poor quality phones. When foreign phones are there, then our people have to raise the quality. So the domestic availability condition denied our producers this access to world class raw materials also. And finally, what happened in subsequent years after independence in 1960s, 70s, our products quality has gone down badly. They failed to compete in the global marketplace, and poor performance of exports created foreign exchange shortages. Because of poor exports, further tightening of import controls were imposed. So this became big vicious cycle in our country in 1960s, 1970s. You see, from 1951 to 1981, the per capita income raised at an annual rate of just 1.5%. So what it ultimately led to? Cycle of import controls led to poor exports performance. So imports were controlled. Then it led to poor exports performance. Then poor export performance forced further import controls. Ultimately, we allowed the rupee to depreciate to incentivize the exporters in 1990s. So it created a vicious cycle. Cycle of import controls led to poor exports performance as exports reduced, and subsequently more controls on imports were imposed. So what happened after 1991? After 1991, we have done away with import controls as per new economic policy. In fact, rupee devaluation incentivized the exporters. Subsequently, top quality products began to flow into the country. Then consumers now access more and more quality products, and producers could access world class raw materials, machinery and technology. This also resulted in improvement in the quality of our products. So the protection given with the import controls till 1990 in fact resulted in poor quality of goods produced in our country, and after 1991 what happened? We allowed the imports, and up to some extent our domestic manufacturers are also competing with the global manufacturers after the liberalization in 1991, right? It allowed exports to grow alongside imports, and in fact our exports of goods and services in fact increased six-fold from 2002-3 to 2011-12. So why the temptation to return to import substitution is wrong? So now the government is thinking, by encouraging domestic manufacturing through Make in India, then import substitution can be ensured. But it is wrong because of these reasons as stated by Arvind Panagadia. Replacing imports by domestic production would not lead to net addition to Make in India. What happens? Equivalent reduction in exports is sure to accompany the reduction in imports. So the point to note here is, if the imports are restricted, then equivalent reduction in exports may also take place. If the foreigners cannot sell their goods to us through the import controls, then they will not have revenues to pay for the goods they buy from us. If we cut back on their goods, they will cut back on our goods. So in the present day global arena, it is not possible in fact to control the imports, and this has happened in 2015-16. When there is large decline in our oil import bill because of the global fall in oil prices, the accompanied exports are also declined. So both are interrelated. When foreigner is In fact, when we are purchasing foreign goods, they will purchase our goods. Now it became almost the mutual existence. If import substitution is as a result of increased efficiency, then it is fine. But in our country, it is not that easy to ensure this increase in efficiency. Because of import substitution, domestic industry will be highly protected. What happened in 1950s, 60s, 70s, and that should not be repeated now as per Aravind Panagadia. Right, friends, this concludes today's editorial discussion. Have a nice weekend. Thank you.